How are you?
I'm well. How are you doing?
All right.
Get some curveballs on 260. I don't understand what's going on with the department having some issues with some stuff. All right. So who do I want today? Do the flag. How's everybody? Good. Welcome. Would you all stand for the pledge, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Okay, so we're going to reopen the hearing for HB 624. And I'd like the prime sponsor to just kind of reintroduce the bill, if that's okay. And hold on, where's my... There it is. Go ahead.
Good to go? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning, honorable members of the committee. I'm Representative Michael Vose, representing Rockingham District 9, and I was the prime sponsor of HB 624. And I'll just refresh everyone's memory because we've already been here once before, that HB 624 makes a few minor adjustments to RSA 162H, the statute that governs the Site Evaluation Committee. Its original intent was to lower the cost of a declaratory ruling as a way to give the public more access to the Site Evaluation Committee. The House Ways and Means Committee amended the bill to restore the funding for declaratory rulings and to add new language to direct the Site Evaluation Committee to come up with a procedure to accept, investigate, and act upon complaints against a site certificate holder. That bill passed the House twice. And in discussions last Tuesday after the public hearing on this bill with the Commissioner of the Department of Environmental Services, I have sent to all of you a suggested language change that clarifies some other parts of the bill. The other part of the bill, besides the fee aspect of the bill, was to clarify that only the committee, only the Site Evaluation Committee has the authority to make judgments about whether a site certificate holder is meeting the terms and conditions of the certificate, not the administrator. And that's what the language in 624 meant to clarify. Well, the DES commissioner was concerned that the language change that we made might preclude an agency that's been designated to investigate or to monitor a site certificate. It might preclude them from making recommendations. So I've made some suggested word changes, and I've sent those along to you. Basically,
does everybody have this?
Yeah, I'm grabbing it right now.
Basically, those word changes just clarify that an appropriate state agency so designated is allowed to determine whether any term or condition of a certificate issued under this chapter is being violated. So it's a minor word change, but an important one, and I hope that a future amendment will incorporate those language changes. And I'm not going to say any more than that because I know you want to get along to another amendment that's being proposed and have a public hearing on that. But I'd be happy to take any questions to clarify anything I've said here so far this morning. Thank you.
Okay. Is there a sign-up sheet for this?
Yes, I'm grabbing it right now.
Are there any questions from the committee? Senator Gaida.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative, this bill was the result of the committee that met last summer. Is that correct? The Senate took some actions, and we asked the House to take some actions. I think this reflects the nature of those discussions during that committee. Is that correct?
Yes, that's mostly correct. The bill was actually filed before that committee had its had its run in all its hearings. But we did discuss it during the course of those hearings and decided that this was appropriate language, yes.
Further comments, questions? And so, with no further comments or questions, thank you, Representative, we appreciate it.
Thank you.
Anybody else want to speak on this particular bill? Yeah, is there, I don't see, does DES or anybody from the Department of Energy want to comment on this? No comments. Okay, interesting. All right, with that, we're going to close the hearing. There's nobody else wanting to speak on it, and what time's the next one? All right, so we've got a minute or two. I thought that would take a little bit longer. I'm sorry.
What are you gonna take the water amendment,
Which one's that?
the 624?
Yeah.
Get the hearing done.
Yeah, we can do that now, I guess. I'll wait till he gets back into the room.
No.
Well, I'm on it, right? So, actually, we can actually open up this again to discuss the Waters Amendment, the Abarton Waters Amendment, if you'd like. Pardon me? Sure. Is there a motion to move into exec?
I would probably wait.
Yes.
You recess the hearing until quarter after.
Mm-hmm.
So if someone,
Yeah, okay.
might be at home trying to listen and said, oh, I got 10 minutes to go do something.
Right. Yeah, all right, so we'll be right back to
And then there were just, you and I. Scared them all away, I guess.
I showed up and everybody.
And I thought that only happened to me.
Get off. All right, let's open up the hearing for a non-germane amendment for 624.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator
Recognize Senator
David
Waters.
Waters, District 4, and I'm introducing our amendment. And we thought the feeling was it would be best to have a separate hearing on a non-germane amendment, so this issue could be brought forward relative to net energy metering by hydroelectric generators. And as you all will recall, we did so much work last year on House Bill 315 and Senate Bill 91 in this whole area about customer generators. And it seems that we do need to do a kind of a clarification of the law relating to one situation for customer generators. We're going to hear about that. So you see what the amendment does here in clarifying that in the bold down here, shall be eligible to customer generator as a matter of law without regard to whether such hydroelectric generator's electric utility customer account of record at the point of interconnection to the electric grid. And that's what we'll hear about, is that the shared interconnection and who's the customer and who's the seller there. The Department of Energy, we've heard through Heidi Kroll, would like a change on line 24, where previously that this financial settlement methodology would have, for informational purposes, been given to the department, but now we'd like to say on line 24, instead of informational purposes, to say for review and approval within 30 days. For review and approval within 30 days. That's, the department feels that would give them an ability to, obviously, to review and approve, but also it was important to have 30 days there so that this process wouldn't drag out. So that seems a fair way to go on that.
Senator, where exactly would that be?
That is on line 24.
Line 24 starting?
Yes, so those first couple words, informational purposes, would be replaced with review and approval within 30 days.
You get that? Okay. All right.
And then, you know, because this is a little, you know, customer generated, we've done a lot of work. I mean, actually it goes back, you know, what, 10, 15 years when we first started to, even longer, that we first started to work on this issue and made such great progress with 315 and 91. But it was felt that in this particular case that we'll hear about, this clarification is needed. And I would like to, in my sense of it, Mr. Chairman, and the amendment that you brought forward, the point here is that the basic principle of customer generator and how we've developed it in 315-91, this doesn't change that. It just is a clarification for particular circumstance. And with that, I will be happy to turn it over for the folks behind me.
Thank you, Senator. Any questions? Seeing none? Great.
Thank you.
Chairman Bose, you have a comment? It says you're in support of this.
Yes, I just want to say that I am in support of the amendment as changed just a few moments ago by Senator Waters.
That's
I
important
was
for
going
us.
to recommend, without that change, that maybe this should wait for its own bill in the fall, but I think with that change, it's acceptable.
We look forward to working with you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. No questions. All right. Great. Josh Elliott from the New Hampshire Department of Energy.
I think it may be better to hear from the proponents of the bill first to talk about exactly what's going on here, and then have the department follow up.
I would appreciate if you did first, actually.
Okay, fair enough.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. For the record, Josh Elliott with Department of Energy. Appreciate Senator Waters' comments about having the department review and approve any of the financial settlement methodology, excuse me, by the department. We would respectfully ask that that be changed from 30 days to 90 days. That would give us a hard cap of when we would have to take action on it by. However, with a lot of these things, there may be some back and forth, either within the department, with Brookfield itself, or potentially Eversource in terms of trying to sort out all the details. So we would want to, the goal would be for the department to finish it sooner than 90 days. But understanding that there's sometimes other parties that we have to deal with who may or may not necessarily see the time urgency into that. So we would like a little bit of additional latitude.
Is 60 a good day? Would that be appropriate?
We could probably get there with 60. We would prefer 90 just to give us some insurance policy. And again, this isn't something the department would be sitting on, waiting on it, and not taking action on it. But we would want to have a little bit of extra leeway if there's a third party that we're dealing with that's not getting us the information, that would give some buffer for that. We could probably make it work with 60 days, but 90 days would have that additional assurance that we have everything that we need from third parties.
It'd be kind of like a Bradley compromise, right?
Bradley Special, I believe, is the
Bradley
term of
special,
art.
yeah. All right.
I should say the department is neutral on the amendment. We do have an additional concern that we wanted to raise revolving around the customer generator language. I know this has been termed as a technical fix. The department would respectfully disagree with that characterization. In prior year, we had a discussion around Monadnock paper. So we're all familiar with the Senate Bill 91 and the House Bill 315 compromise, where that language is included. It was a little bit of a different situation of where you had Monadnock paper mills was both consuming the power on site as well as owning both of the generation assets. In that situation, the combined generation assets were 1.9 megawatts combined. This situation, we're talking about 30 megawatts of power. It's a slightly more complex situation because you have multiple parties here. It's not one party that owns both the generation assets as well as consuming behind the load. In this situation, you have Brookfield, which owns the generation assets, and then you have White Mountain Paper, which consumes a portion of the electricity generated behind the meter, so to speak.
Wouldn't that fall under group net metering, though?
It does, but I will get to that.
Oh.
So in this, if this was a situation where White Mountain Paper continue to own their generation assets and we're coming forward with this would be a different conversation. But in this situation, both the generation and the consumption are done by two completely separate entities. And then the separate generator is seeking to net meter rather than the actual retail customer, which would be White Mountain Paper. As mentioned, Brookfield is the generator, but does not consume any of that generation itself. So it's not properly considered a customer generator within the general construct of net metering. The department believes that this language is narrowly constructed in such a way that I'm sorry, I started throwing out names without actually talking about what the situation is. The department's understanding this would only apply to Brookfield, which owns a series of hydroelectric generating facilities along the Androscoggin River up in the North Country. There is White Mountain Paper, which previously owned those generation assets, but still White Mountain Paper being a major employer up in the North Country, one of the, if not the only last major paper mill, I should say paper products mill up there. They previously owned the generation, and now they have sold off those generation assets, but they're still consuming a portion of that power generated, which all occurs behind the meter. Again, we believe that this would only apply in this situation with Brookfield and White Mountain Paper. The department is concerned that this would be precedent setting and leading to other generators seeking similar legislative carve-outs and exceptions in the statute. As probably mentioned, other hydroelectric dams have no load and participate as retail customers, whereas this legislation sort of seeks to get the best of both worlds by participating both as load serving to a third party, being White Mountain Paper, as well as a customer generator, which goes outside the norms of the net metering arrangements, and sort of allocating who the customer generator is in the relationship gets to be precedent setting in terms of for the department. I will point out from the department's analysis that we don't see that there's anything in current statute preventing White Mountain Paper, the other entity, from serving as the customer generator for net metering purposes and being able to do essentially what they would like to do in this situation. It may require some upgrades and some changes to the metering equipment. And how the meters are read and data reported would require some revised agreements with Brookfield, the generator, but to address all of those sort of details. But from our analysis of the situation, that this could be the goal of Brookfield in this situation could be accomplished without legislation.
That it?
That is it.
That is it. Okay. Questions from the committee. Senator Waters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Thank you, Josh. So, I mean, I think it is important, as you said, that this change appears to be for this one case. So in and of itself, does not upset the apple cart of customer generator concept.
It doesn't in terms of purely in terms of numbers. As far as we can tell, this would be the only facility that would be impacted by this. Our concern, in the larger scheme, we've heard me say ad nauseum. I'm sure everyone is very tired of hearing me talk about it, the ongoing study in regards to the net metering tariff. But in terms of actual pure raw numbers, no, doing this would not have any sort of massive material change on the current in whether or not cost shifting exists, et cetera, all those other questions. Our concern is that it could be that it would be precedent setting, and that other generators may come to the legislature looking for similar exemptions.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's what was going to be my next question.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
In that, I mean, precedent setting is kind of a legal term in court actions, but for here, it's only precedent setting. I mean, it really never is precedent setting because somebody could come in here and we decide no. I mean, we vote when statutory changes are made, and I do think that I think I'll speak for my colleagues that we tend to look at things with a fresh eye every time that it comes along. So I guess that I mean, I'm concerned about that concern in a way because we're trying to solve this one issue, but that leads to my larger question. I think it's fair to say that because it's like 15 years now. I'm trying to think when Molly Kelly and Bradley and others first started to work on the issues of customer generator. It's been a long time. We've made a lot of progress on it, but things are likely to change in the future because the energy demands are going to change in the future. But isn't it the case though that the concept of customer generator, it seems to me, does cover this kind of issue where you potentially have somebody who is not a consumer on site but is in this arrangement, and isn't it fair to think about that definition as a potentially including this?
So I will. So I'll answer the first part and then go back to the second part. In terms of precedent setting, I didn't mean to imply that there was any sort of legal weight to that word. However, it would be. We view it as the duty of the department to sort of highlight, hey, just in case, just so you're aware, this could be potentially doing that. Again, as the policymakers, it is your judgment call, your collective judgment call as to whether or not you want to go down that route. But we just wanted to highlight it as just for your consideration. It may be, as you mentioned, hey, you know what, we're okay with this, and we'll take them case by case basis, which isn't entirely within your purview. In terms of your second question, yes, consumer generator is going to be continually evolving, as you sort of highlighted. The energy field is very dynamic. We're going through massive radical change, for a lack of a better way of putting it. I mean, it probably understates it, despite the weight of the words. Yes, that occasionally, we'll have to reevaluate as time goes on. However, in this sort of instance, we would have the concern that you're sort of getting the best of both worlds, right? You can participate as a group host net metering while also selling some of your generation on the side. If that is not on the side, but through a separate arrangement, if that is it, that is a policy decision for the legislature to make. If that's what they would like to do, we are just highlighting the fact that is different from the way that has been done in the past. And if that is, that's why we sort of view it as not as a sort of a technical fix where you sort of have this additional opening here. to do both. If that is the desire of the legislature to go down that route, we just wanted to highlight that that is sort of different than what has been done typically, and to highlight that so that you have all the information that you need to make the decisions you need to make.
Well, thank you, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm glad that the neutrality, so I get the impression that if it's neutral, the heartburn is not too intense, so thank you.
Senator Gaida.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would submit that any law that this legislature passes is a change and introduces new possibilities. I would call your attention to the language starting on the middle of line 26, that nothing in this provision shall be deemed to approve or allow the participation of energy storage facilities in net energy metering unless otherwise approved or allowed by law or an order or decision issued or a rule adopted by the Department of Energy or the Public Utilities Commission. I think that more than adequately addresses your concerns. Thank you.
Would you like me to respond?
I'm not sure. It wasn't a question, it was a
So
statement.
two separate issues. There's the energy storage piece of this, and then there's the actual hydroelectric concerning Brookfield piece of it. So that was, I think it was clarification language, I believe, at the request of another legislator that be included.
Senator Perkins Corker, then Senator Gray.
Thank you, Chair. With our change, we would now be submitting to the Department of Energy for review and approval within, sounds like might be 60 days, the approval of this financial settlement statement or financial settlement methodology. I mean, is it not true that in other state markets, it's fairly standard to settle out energy storage and generation behind the meter via software? Is the concern here that there's a generation facility and then obviously some kind of bilateral contract with on-site load consumption, and that's all happening behind the meter? Or?
Yes, there's the additional complexity of this, and I didn't mention this earlier. Of those series of generation assets owned by Brookfield, there are two that are above the 5 megawatt net metering cap. So those wouldn't be able to participate in municipal group host net metering. So that's sort of a way to see how they're allocating the behind the load generation to what facility to make sure that that cap is maintained.
Okay, and a follow-up if I may.
Yep.
Yep. What criteria do you plan on using to approve the financial settlement methodology? Is it just what you just described, which is just to ensure compliance with existing law, or?
I would need to check with folks at the department just to make absolutely sure, because I'm not the one necessarily reviewing these financial statements. I believe that would be a factor in it. I wouldn't want to inadvertently say that, yes, that is the only one. It is entirely possible that there are other factors that go into that, but those would be our regulatory folks or our sustainable folks who would know all the nitty-gritty details. But I can get an answer for you on
I was
that.
going to say, I'd be interested in following
Yep.
up if you could. Thanks.
Of course.
Senator Gray.
Yeah, I was looking at the new language on 24 and whether it should be 60 or 90 days, thinking that maybe they could have it 60 days and ask for an approval to go to another 30 days, but I don't see anybody in here that's going to track this limit no matter what we put in there, or has the ability to track it. So it's kind of like but it's got no teeth. It's got no one overseeing this to make sure that there is compliance with whatever time limit we put in there. And comment on that, please.
It's sort of the tricky problem because there's no appeal and no authority to appeal to. If say if we sat on it and didn't do it, didn't approve anything, we just sort of sat there and nobody took a look at it. Right? There's no obvious recourse. Putting on my old legislative hat, there's always the joke, right? There's no committee and commission police, right? You're supposed to meet within 45 days by the first name member, but there's depending on any myriad of factors, that there's no enforcement mechanism to make sure that
So
happens.
back to 30.
Yeah.
Senator Gray.
Well, the only solution that
well taken.
the only solution that I could come up with was to put in a statement that says, or it is automatically approved if the time limit goes. And if I'm going to do something like that, then I want to go to the 90 days. comment on that, please?
I think we would be able to, if we were to go to the 90 days, I would feel comfortable saying that you could have some automatic default mechanism where it is automatically approved by the department, or automatically deemed to have been approved by the department if there's no action by the department by the 90-day mark. I think having that extra leeway within those 90 days, I think we would feel comfortable with that.
How about 60 and then after 90, it's automatically approved?
You could do that I think we could do that as well. If it's 60 days and then if there's no additional action by the department at 90 days, it's automatically approved.
We want 45 days.
45?
I said we could get Senator French. But yeah, we could work with that. That would give us enough lead time, again, working with third parties where it's outside of the department's control as to whether or not they give us the information. That would at least give us enough lead time that we would be able to if there are those delays, there's enough of a cushion there that we can meet the statutory requirement.
So Daly, just make a note of that though with with Senator Gray has suggested within automatic approval after whatever we determine as far as. So, further discussion. Thank you, Josh. You did a wonderful job.
I try my best. Thank you, Senator.
Appreciate it. Mark Sanborn, would you like to comment?
So, Mr. Chairman, is this just about the amendment or
Yes.
the bill overall?
The amendment.
Nothing on the amendment. I
All right.
have some comments to bill overall.
Okay. That was at the last hearing. Senator Gray?
I would be in favor if he wants to comment on the bill overall, to have him come up, because it's, at the end of the hearing for this, then open it up for.
You okay with that? All right. If you want to talk about the bill overall? So you approve the amendment then?
The amendment, I'll leave up to all you experts,
Okay.
including Josh. Good morning, all. For the record, Mark Sanborn, Assistant Commissioner at the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services. And just so everyone knows, I've spoken to the sponsors of this bill about this concern. The Commissioner Scott just had some concerns in terms of the changes for the SEC process about when a state agency is the designee to follow up on an action, about them having to have their decisions come back to the SECs. Because if it's an environmental issue, it's been given to New Hampshire DES because we're the one who handle that. If it's a fish and game issue, it's been given to them because they're the ones who handle that. So we've worked with the chair, and I know he sent some amendment language. So I guess I'm up here just strongly advocating support of this language that the chairman has put forward on making that change. We think that'll lead to a much better process.
He just gave you a nice nod.
So,
All right.
well, with that, I can, on behalf of Commissioner Scott, withdraw his opposition to the bill that he had signed in last time.
And we appreciate your input. Thank you.
Fantastic.
Do you folks have any questions from the committee? Seeing none? Thank you.
And thank you to Chairman Bose for working with us on this.
All right. Thank you for speaking up. And with that, Kelly, go ahead.
As long as you've got, I just at some point wanted to go back to Chairman Bose and ask him about our discussion of the 60, 90, and automatic approval. But if you've got more people on the list, I'd
We have
like
just.
to give him a second chance afterwards.
Okay. Kelly, you're in favor but not wishing to speak. Donna Gamarsh in support, not wishing to speak. Heidi Kroll in support, wishing to speak. Along with Steve, do you want to? It's Zaretti, correct?
That is correct.
And then we'll address Senator Grace.
Great. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Heidi Kroll. I work at Gallagher, Callahan, and Gartrell, and I'm here today on behalf of Brookfield Renewable in support of the amendment sponsored by Senator Avard and Senator Waters to House Bill 624. So just a quick kind of reminder and background about where we've come and so kind of why we're here. Folks, I think will recall that we passed two bills last year, SB 91 and House Bill 315, which the governor had a nice signing ceremony down in Derry in August in celebration of those two pieces of legislation. And as part of so House Bill 315 allowed for group net metering for municipalities, schools, village districts, other political subdivisions, and allows those particular entities to group net meter with facilities that are up to 5 megawatts. SB 91 had an assortment of items in it, and including in Part 2, Section 1 of SB 91, there was a provision that was really meant to kind of level the playing field, I guess, if you will, for a very small, select handful of hydro generators in New Hampshire. Monadnock Paper Mills and Brookfield in particular are the two scenarios that we're aware of, where on all other accounts, those hydro facilities would be eligible for group net metering or regular net metering in the case of Monadnock Paper Mills, but for the fact that they shared an interconnection point with the grid, to the grid, with other entities and other consumers. And so this was topic was talked about even prior to SB 91. I think we had some legislation in prior years, kind of got caught up in the COVID scenario and never went forward. But there was always bipartisan support to agreeing that we needed to kind of address that situation and kind of level the playing field and make things fair. And even back then, we had reached out to a variety of parties, including Eversource at the time, and worked with them on that language. And we thought we got it right, but when you kind of dig into these things, you realize that there are some I's and some T's that didn't get addressed. So after the passage of SB 91, Brookfield did reach out to Eversource. So this was in early fall, and the two parties began engaging and trying to figure out how to operationalize that provision of law. And quite a bit of back and forth with emails, meetings, that sort of thing during the course of into the early winter. And I think they just unearthed the fact that there were some unique situations with Brookfield's site up north, kind of legacy configuration of these hydro facilities and mills that have evolved over 100 years or more. And so like I mentioned, during the fall and early winter, Brookfield and Eversource worked cooperatively to arrive at a resolution to address the technical issues that they identified as kind of holding things up in terms of Brookfield being able to group net meter with the municipalities under House Bill 315. And at that point, started doing outreach to other parties. There was definitely some outreach with staff at the Department of Energy, followed up by a meeting with Chris Elms and Josh Elliott. We also reached out to Chairman Vose, and then ultimately kind of everybody seemed to agree that just some clarification would be important. So that's kind of how we arrived here today, and I just wanted to share that background with folks. Two other things I was going to mention before I turn it over to Steve, who can kind of talk about the specifics. Even prior to House Bill 315, there was a great deal of interest among municipalities and businesses to group net meter with hydro facilities that are 1 megawatt and less. That's been happening for a number of years, also happening with solar, but strong interest with the hydros as well. And with passage of House Bill 315, that interest has only grown amongst the political subdivisions because they know that there's now more supply out there when we opened up that window between 1 and 5 megawatt size facilities. So there's definitely interest among municipalities and school districts to group net meter with the Brookfield hydro facilities that are eligible, the ones that are 5 megawatts or less. So I just wanted to mention that. And also the obvious, but we're in a situation right now where we've got very high electricity rates. And so there's opportunity here that's waiting for savings for taxpayers, for municipalities that are interested in this. So with that, I'll turn it over to Steve and let him talk about the details there.
Great, thanks Heidi. Good morning, Steve Zaretti with Brookfield Renewable. I think Mr. Elliott did a nice job describing the configuration of the site. The customer generator piece is unique in this case because the retail customer at the point of interconnection is not an affiliated entity. It's White Mountain Paper. So as Mr. Elliott described, there are 6 hydro stations that share the point of interconnection with this unaffiliated retail load. 4 of those would be eligible based on size for the program. And in fact, the provision in SB 91, of course, intended to include these facilities. Absent this clarification that we're proposing here, we're only aware of the option of pursuing infrastructure upgrades to essentially interconnect these facilities individually, which would undermine the intent of what SB 91 intended to accomplish. The other option may be that Brookfield took over the retail account at the point of interconnection, but that would be a bit of a strange scenario where we would be taking on an obligation for an unaffiliated load. I do want to clarify that mill load is served by those generators. That would be unchanged here. They do have first priority in terms of the available generation, and we intend to honor that contract regardless. The other piece is the financial settlement piece. As described, there's, again, 6 facilities there. 4 would be eligible, 2 would not be, and then there's the unaffiliated mill load. So the best way to go about this, in our view, and in discussion with Eversource and the department, would be this financial settlement approach. You'd use station-level meter data and essentially establish a calculation that would determine what generation is actually eligible and what is not. So I think that's the issues themselves. We do very much appreciate the cooperation and coordination we've received from Eversource, from Chairman Vos, and from the department. And I'm certainly happy to answer any questions specific to the site or these issues.
Senator Perkins Coker.
Yeah, thank you for explaining it. Just a couple technical questions. So is there like a shared facilities agreement for those generation plant, the hydroelectric plants, and then White Mountain Power?
So
point of interconnection?
historically, that had been the case. Now the interconnection agreement that's in place only lists Brookfield as the on the interconnection itself.
Okay, so I'm going to give myself a follow-up. So the ISA is with Brookfield,
Yes.
and then White Mountain Power is sort of, I
They're
guess,
behind
in
the meter and the
bilateral
retail
agreement.
customer, but yes, not included in the agreement for the interconnection itself.
Right, okay, because they're getting their power from you guys as first priority behind the meter.
Right.
Okay, all right, thank you, that's helpful for me to understand.
Further questions? Seeing none, well done. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Senator Gray, you had a question for Representative Vos?
I just wanted to see if he had comments on the discussion we had about the 60, 90 days and automatic approval, because that change was his basis for supporting this amendment. So if any of that we have discussed changes because of what we are contemplating as a change, I want to know about it.
Thank you, Senator, for that question. I'm okay with that language change. Either way, it comes out the same as far as I'm concerned. Thank you.
Thank you. So maybe we can work on a committee amendment so that there aren't so many moving parts. Senator Waters suggested that, so we can do that in exec. When we exec this. Does anybody else want to speak on this bill, this amendment? Seeing none, we're going to close the hearing on that. So that's what we'll do. In exec, we'll come up with a committee amendment for exec, so it's all one. And Senator Gray, 60-90, is that, we okay with that?
I think if you're going, that's probably a question for exec, but if I were to choose, I would probably go 90 days if you are giving an automatic approval. I mean.
All right, okay. I just want to have a direction to, that's good, all right. Okay, well done, and moving right along, we're going to hear from the prime sponsor of HB 1328 FN. We'll hear from the prime sponsor, Representative Vos.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Representative Vose, Rockingham, District 9. I am not the prime sponsor of this bill, but Representative Harrington, who is the prime sponsor of this bill, is currently on a Caribbean cruise.
I feel sorry for him.
And he asked me to introduce this bill to the committee.
Poor guy.
The committee will recall that we had a similar situation last year where I had to introduce a bill for Representative Harrington because he was in the Caribbean. Seems to be a pattern. Seems to be a pattern.
All right. You have the floor.
All right. So HB 1328 is a bill that allows a small telephone company to petition to the PSC to be relieved of its carrier of last resort obligation. There are several small regional telephone companies in New Hampshire that are left over from the breakup of Ma Bell. Some of them have very few customers. But it is a financial burden on those small companies to be obligated to be the carrier of last resort for the service territory that they serve. So this bill provides a way for them to shed that obligation, which will allow them to be a little bit more financially secure. The other advantage of the bill is that it does away with an obsolete Public Utilities Commission assessment that's still being collected because of the statute that we're proposing to change here. Now, doing away with their obligation to be the carrier of last resort can't be done just cavalierly and on a whim. It requires that certain conditions be met in order for that petition to go forward. And those conditions are clearly outlined in the bill starting on line 6 and proceeding through to line 10. Those are the conditions under which a small regional utility would have to function in order to be eligible to apply for relief of its carrier of last resort obligation. It's a pretty simple bill, really. And 38 states have already done this, including Vermont and Maine. They've had no negative effects from making this change. Some people will argue, well, if you remove this carrier of last resort obligation, won't there be some people who are left out in the cold and unable to get any telephone service? Well, in the modern world, with wireless, with voice over IP, with all the other ways you can get interconnectivity to the rest of the world, that's not going to be an issue, particularly if the terms that I just mentioned, outlined in lines 6 through 10, are met. So I ask you to seriously consider this bill. It isn't going to make a huge difference financially to the companies involved or to the ratepayers who are continuing to pay the PUC assessment obligation, but it's a little bit, and every little bit helps. So I hope you consider that, and I'll be happy to answer any questions if I can.
Senator Gaddis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Representative. My first question is, what would be the impact on a community if we rescind this last resort provision? In terms of impact on individuals who may live out in the woods. I have 27 towns, most of them are rural. So what would be the potential impact to them of this, given that we don't have wireless across the entire state yet? Pretty well there, but not there completely.
Well, the impact to them of a petition to apply to be relieved of the carrier of last resort obligation would be that if that petition was granted, then they would no longer have recourse to ask a specific utility, okay, you have to provide me with service. But the terms under which they could apply for that obligation are so stringent that it's probably not going to affect very many people, if anybody, in fact.
So it would not then potentially impact the emergency services, the ability to reach out to 911 or whatever the case may be? Is there a potential impact there?
That was a question that came up 2 or 3 times during the course of the public hearing on this bill in the House Science, Technology, and Energy Committee. And the answer was consistently no, that there are so many other opportunities for people to obtain connectivity that it should not impact an individual's ability to call for emergency services.
Thank you.
Senator Waters?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to follow up on Senator Gaida's questions, the language in the bill has 97% of telecommunications service over the entire area. But wouldn't it be the case that since it's at 97%, that you might have an individual town where there might be a fairly large percent which wouldn't have mobile access because we don't have full service provided, full signals around the state. Whereas, a lot of other towns in that service area might be 100%, but you might have a town where it's considerably lower than 97% because of the whole service area. That's the case.
I suppose that's possible, but there are people here who could indicate to you whether or not that is the case anywhere in the state.
Thank you. Senator Perkins Coker.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. We got a letter which I think raises a good point, which, the bill requires that mobile telecommunications service provider offers in the aggregate services to at least 97% of households. What happens if that service provider withdraws? Is there, I guess, a way to reinstitute a carrier of last resort for that municipality if cell phone service is no longer offered?
Thank you for that question. It's a good one, and one that I can't answer, but I suspect that there are people here behind me who can. So re-ask that question when you get a chance.
Thank you, Representative. We appreciate your testimony.
Thank you.
Josh, do you want to speak now?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Again, Josh Elliott for the Department of Energy. The department is neutral on the bill, but would like to highlight a concern I think we were just discussing about the E911 access. As you noted in the bill, there's 95% of households, or then there's the 97% threshold. We are concerned that there could be a loss of telephone access for those people who need it in an emergency situation. Again, it permits a carrier of last resort to withdraw its obligation if at least 95% are served by a wireline voice provider and 97% by a wireless voice provider. But it doesn't establish any criteria regarding service availability or any requirement to serve all the customers in a given area. That's sort of the crux of that E911 access. If you have somebody who's in that 3% or somebody who's in that 5%. Now, granted, they could be covered through other things. Either they have high-speed internet access, or they have, they have the satellite dish internet access, and may be able to do VoIP or voice over internet protocol options. But that's not sort of spelled out here. If okay, if there's this, you can back out of your being carrier of last resort. We did want to highlight an additional concern on the federal funding piece of it, where there's language in that subsection B about receiving state, federal, municipal funding to serve the entire municipality. There's no doesn't state the type of service that could be provided. Either it's voice over broadband or guarantee that such service would be provided, or on what terms and conditions. I know there's a lot of discussion around federal infrastructure money, as well as the ARPA bill in terms of a lot of broadband, a lot of funds for broadband. So hopefully we'll be able to get to everybody. But just again, with those federal funding concerns, there's not what type of service would be provided under those. I think Senator Perkins Quokka, I think in the letter, I'm not sure who sent it, but the department also has a similar concern of where we're looking at a specific point in time with regards to coverage. where this carrier of last resort could pull out and then say there's the other carrier who's providing all of the coverage or most of this coverage, then withdraws for whatever reason, goes bankrupt, goes out of business, nobody picks it up, etc. So there could be an issue there of where, again, you're looking at a specific point in time rather than without any sort of recourse of, okay, if that, the service that you were relying on by a private unregulated company was considered fulfilling that obligation, or considered fulfilling that obligation, allowing that carrier of last resort to retire from that area, then what do you do? And there's that question. I'm not. There's sort of. Unfortunately, I don't have a suggestion of how to fix that, but I wanted to highlight it as a concern of the department to the committee.
Senator Guido.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Josh, you may not be the person that has the answer to that. My question is there any way to engineer coverage for that 3% or 5% that aren't covered in the event this legislation passes without making a carrier be the carrier of last resort?
In those cases, you would require some sort of mandate to cover those areas. I'm trying to think if there is a mechanism that would actually provide that, other than sort of the carrier of last resort is sort of the mechanism to provide that. I'm trying to think if there's another mechanism other than just stating in the legislative, in a law somewhere of like they must cover this, which essentially has the same effect, but. I'll ask some more knowledgeable folks at the department about that and see if there's another mechanism beyond that carrier of last resort.
Senator Perkins Quokka, then Senator Gray. Okay, Senator Gray.
Okay. If I'm looking at areas that aren't fully covered right now, I don't believe I heard in your testimony that there's anyone out there that has a pending request that hasn't either been approved or disproved for service under the area of last or the coverage. So something would have to change for one of these to happen. Someone either subdivide their land, sell their land or whatever, and someone move into that area. Okay? And given, and I know that the question is coming, but it's, ways off still. Given that, we have the satellite coverage and other cell phone coverage and possibly low Earth orbit satellites in the near future, why wouldn't I just say, you bought the land, you whatever, you change your situation, and this is just going to be a cost of you utilizing that land the way you want.
That would make sense to me. However, I'm concerned about the people who already, they maybe have purchased their own home, they already had this connection, and all of a sudden this connection is now being withdrawn. Not necessarily new development, if I understand your scenario correctly, of where you're thinking of somebody at the end of the road somewhere, and there's that the last house, they have 50 acres, and they decide to put it in a subdivision further up the road. What happens then? Is that the scenario? Am I correct in that assumption?
Certainly, if service was withdrawn, that would be a different situation. But the way I read this, it was people who are asking for service and do not have it right now. Am I being too narrow in my, is there a significant thing about, people who have service and their provider withdraws?
I don't have that in my notes. Let me check with someone back at the department, and I might be able to get an answer quickly before the end of the hearing. But that was my working assumption, that was the case. But given I can see that would be a decision point for a lot of folks, I want to make sure the committee has the correct answer to that question.
Thank you.
Senator Perkins Quokka? Nope. Okay. All right. Seeing how no further questions, thank you very much, Joshua. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Catherine Heck. Welcome.
Thank you.
And opposed?
Yes, sir. Good morning. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and committee members. My name is Catherine Heck for the record. I represent the New Hampshire Municipal Association, and we're here to oppose 1328 for some of the reasons that you previously heard, mostly because we are concerned that there is not coverage for some of the residents in our municipalities, and they would therefore not be able to access 911, police, and fire in the event of an emergency. Our working assumption is that it is for these leftover small regional phone companies from Ma Bell, so they're already providing service. So if that is not the case, then of course we'd be open to discussing that, but it's for people who are already receiving service. And as we know from the broadband discussion, when they talk about 95% served, that's based on a census block. So if they're using similar types of metrics to collect that data, the census block, if it's one person served in 100, that's considered served. So we're concerned with the 5 people on the end of the road. We know that there are many municipalities in our state, to Senator Guida's point, that not only don't have broadband, they also don't have good wireless coverage, if at any wireless coverage at their home. So we do know that from the Department of Business and Economic Affairs, they're working on the $220 million coming into New Hampshire between the ARPA funds, the Capital Projects Fund, and of course the Infrastructure Fund on the federal level to disperse those and get that last mile of broadband to everyone. That's a few years out from now, and that might be a more appropriate time to have a discussion like this. But right now, we know that a minimum of 13,000, if not 30,000 people are not served, even though they're considered served. So the state is doing their own mapping right now for broadband and for wireless, and that mapping is hopefully going to come out maybe this summer or fall, from my understanding. Again, the Bureau of Business and Economic Affairs is heading that up. And at that time, once we have that mapping, then we would in fact know how many people are not being able to be served. So I can certainly take any questions you might have.
So 13 to 30,000 people potentially could be harmed if this goes through.
Well, they're saying that it has to be 95% served in this bill to 97, and there's some other carrier. But again, if we go back to that data, there's going to be this percentage of people who are left out because they do not have wireless, they do not have broadband. Like I don't have wireless service at my own home. I'm a mile from town. And we just got, due to the Chesterfield model, we just got broadband last week in my community. So, and that goes to every home. But that was last week in a town of 1,600 people. So as we continue, and we were kind of ahead of the game, I suppose. So there's many communities still working through getting the broadband and working with the cable companies as well and the providers. So there's going to be this small percentage. So if we know that's underserved with broadband, there's a percentage of that who won't have access should this bill take effect.
And when should broadband be fully covering the whole state?
Well, I certainly can't make assumptions. I can just tell you that the legislation requires the money to be fully expended by 2026, so I certainly can't discuss. And that's just for the Capital Projects Fund and the ARPA funds. I'm not sure about the infrastructure package when that expires. I want to say it's 2027 or a little further out. So there's certainly time, but I think that mapping is going to be tremendously useful in knowing exactly how many people that this would affect and knowing whether they do in fact have another option or not for service.
Questions from the committee? Senator Guida.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In reference to Senator Gray's or hypothesis that new construction would not have to be covered necessarily, is that something the association would consider? Except I thought I heard you say that looking at new construction might be different because then you give notice to a potential buyer that, hey, you're on your own for making sure you have adequate communications. Whereas the existing customer base doesn't have that opportunity or wasn't notified that this is going to happen. Would you be supportive or at least consider a model that might say any new construction does not fall under the last resort proviso?
I can certainly take that back and we can look at that and analyze it. Our position was based on existing customers. and the concerns police and fire have brought forward to us about existing customers. So we'd certainly be open to discussing it, sir.
Thank you.
No further questions? Thank you very much for your testimony.
Thank you for your time.
Teresa?
Good morning, Teresa Rosenberger from Bernstein Shore, and I'm here representing the New Hampshire Telephone Association. And the New Hampshire Telephone Association is all the old incumbent local exchange carriers models. It's Granite State Telephone, TDS, Bretton Woods Telephone, Consolidated, Dunbarton Telephone. And let me add, before I say anything else, many of these small folks actually have 100% coverage in their own territory. And I will, at some point, mention to you about Dixville Telephone, which used to be a member of the association, but now is no longer. And I'll explain that in a minute. All the incumbent local exchange carriers are totally in support of this bill. And let me be very clear. You petition to ask the PUC permission. It's enabling legislation. So, for example, you take a small town in the North Country, and it's by municipality or multiple municipalities, but it has to be looked at as a municipality. So you take a small town in the North Country, they're probably not going to have 95% competition on the landline side, which means cable, etc., or 97% on the wireless side. And you have to have both. You can't have one and the other. So no one would go to the PUC and petition for those towns. Would they go petition, particularly, say, Manchester, which I'm guessing has 100% competition on the landline and the wireless side? Yes. So you can only do it, and you would only go for communities that are really totally covered. And you have to prove it to the PUC. It's up to you to go and prove it. And if the PUC says, well, you're doing census block, or we don't agree with who did your mapping, then guess what? You got to go back and do it again. Or in this case, the PUC can do rulemaking, and I think they've asked for a fiscal note. I think it's $100,000. Where they could also hire experts to look and see if what you've given them they believe is accurate. Let me just give you a little bit of, I'm not you, Senator Waters, but I'm going to try to give a history lesson a little bit. Carrier of last resort dates back to 1934. And when it was the 1934 Communications Act. And back then, as you remember, people had monopolies. So you were given a monopoly. And because of given that monopoly to provide telephone service, you had to provide service to anybody who wanted it. And it was in the legislation that said duty to serve all in the territory. But you had a monopoly. So you couldn't have, Comcast couldn't come in, Verizon Wireless couldn't come in, you had a monopoly. Then in 1996, they passed the Telecom Act of 1996, and that was specifically designed by the feds to actually create competition. And they wanted competition on the wireless side, on the VoIP side, satellite, cable, etc. I will say to you, it has succeeded. I mean, how often do the feds really succeed? They really succeeded because you've got competition. And you've got it across the board. You have, as you know, you had the university system who got money during the Obama administration to actually, frankly, build a redundant network to what Fairpoint was spending $70-some million to do. You've now got the funding that's coming in now from the feds going to municipalities. They're going to build out their own networks. I mean, it's not just competition from the Verizons or the AT&Ts. It's all over the place. Back in, and some of you were here, back in 2012, we passed Senate Bill 48. And that was the beginning of the deregulation of the telecommunications industry, particularly for the old Ma Bell companies. And back in 2012, the legislature believed we had enough competition to start that process of deregulation. And today, the traditional landlines, back to the old Mom Bell companies, are only required to offer basic service. That's the only thing they're required to do by the PUC, and there isn't even a rate cap anymore. I will say there is not a telecommunications staff person at the PUC either. So you've got a system where we're pretty deregulated. This bill is just enabling the continuation of that deregulation. As of 2016, there are 38 states across the country who've done this. Maine did it in 2016. Sarah Davis is here after me with Consolidated Communications. She can tell you the experience in Maine. There've been no problems. And if you look at the literature, there've been absolutely no issues since they have many of these states. And some of the states have just done away with it. Others are doing what we're doing, is taking that baby step of enabling legislation to allow a company to petition. And so that's really what we are doing here. And again, 75, 95, et cetera. I'm going to hit a couple of questions you asked, if I can read my handwriting from standing up. 911. If you have options to any type of service, you can have 911. Now, there are people in this state today that choose not to have telecommunications service. The man who was up in Canterbury living on the river, if he chooses not to have any type of telecommunications service, he won't be able to dial 911 because you've got to have service to dial 911. So if you choose not to take any service, you're not going to have it. But if you're in a town that petitions and you've got 97%, 95% odds are you probably got 100% if you really go through the process. Whoever your carrier is 911. Today, 85% of the calls to 911 are wireless. So that is the 911 service area versus town. You asked that, Senator Waters. This bill specifies town, and if it's going to be a quote service area, it would have to be town A, meet the criteria, town B, meet the criteria, town C, meet the criteria. So we tried to be pretty protective of the individual communities. Let's see, leaving the area. This is my Dixville story. I represented Dixville. Dixville, after the Balsams closed, which we hope it will reopen, after the Balsams closed, it got to the point that Dixville Telephone had 5 customers, a total of 5. Now, it took us, I can't remember how many years, but I think about 4, maybe longer, to petition for them to finally be able to stop offering service. It was costing them a fortune for those 5 customers. We had to go through the PUC and we had to go through the FCC. And on top of that, the customers that were there, we had to prove to them there was other service. And actually, in this case, they had to agree that they liked the service. Now, I don't think that's going to be the situation if you've got a bigger entity. But the bottom line, any of these carriers, whether it be Consolidated behind me, Granite State Telephone, TDS, even you take a Comcast or Verizon Wireless, they have spent so much money developing this system and these infrastructures, they're not going to leave. The only way you would leave would be if you're like Dixville and you had a total of 5 customers. And the PUC did approve that, as did the FCC. So you can't just say, I'm done, I'm leaving. You've got hoops to jump through. Let's see, what the federal funding. Now you've got the federal funding coming in, and or when it actually comes, in some cases it goes to municipalities, it may go to a provider. I think on the federal funding, what we've tried to do since 2012 here in New Hampshire, and I think what the state's trying to do now with all the funding, is make it technology agnostic. And it's really important that it's technology agnostic, because you don't want to say, well, I'm only going to invest here, when in fact, as you say, there may be that little low-hanging technology that you could use. So my comment to that is technology agnostic. And I think, if I can read my handwriting, I've covered all the questions, and I would be happy to answer any questions I can.
Do you have a question? Oh, Senator Waters and Senator Waters.
Thank you, Teresa. And so, I mean, thanks for clarification about the municipality and so on. I think that my concern, though, really was around B, because on line 11 and 12 of the bill,
Yep.
it does essentially say that forget about A. If B is in place,
Right.
you don't have to worry about A.
Right.
And so, let's say that somebody's received funding to serve the entire municipality, but they pull out, or that something else happens, and then we have no designated carrier of last resort. So I guess kind of what I'm trying to ask is that what about a clawback provision? That if no other entity is actually, the last provider, that then this company that's pulled out is going to come back in.
I'm going to probably answer this in a way you might not want to hear, but most people who know me know that when I ran Fairpoint, we had the money coming in from the feds. And Fairpoint, Comcast, all the landlines, everybody fought it really hard. And the reason was we had a union, and we paid union dues. We paid taxes. We had to get our capital. And all that was expensive. And when you've got money coming in to a place that isn't required to have those expenses, then I honestly don't know if they're covering the entire municipality, why they would not be responsible for being the carrier of last resort. Why would you burden an old mom Bell company who's not getting the federal funding and is trying their best?
Yeah, well, if I may follow up, I mean, I guess what I'm saying is that then shouldn't B have a provision that says, include that one of those others would need to be a carrier of last resort?
I would argue with you that competition will take care of that. The other states haven't put that in, and it hasn't been an issue. And with all the federal funding that's coming in, and with the competition out there and the new entrants into the market, I think this is a case with, quite honestly, competition will take care of it. I really do.
Just for clarification, so other states have put in that provision of a clawback?
No, have not.
Senator
Have not.
What it is, they put in the provision that if one of these other municipalities has funding, one of these other entities has funding to cover the whole municipality, then they have to become a carrier of last resort. That's what I was asking about.
Senator Perkins Cook?
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Thank you. So I guess, well, I'll follow up on Senator Waters' question in a minute, but you seem like the appropriate person to answer this question, and I think Senator Waters was getting at it. Even if other states have passed this, and even if you're only talking about municipalities with full coverage, I guess my question lingers in the event that, a wireless communication provider were to pull out of a municipality, how do we reinstitute some availability of these carrier of last resort services in that instance? Is it that the nearby provider would pick up that municipality, or I guess I'm looking to you for understanding of the industry, because I think what we don't want to do is if this has been passed in other states and it's working fine, and then in 3 and 5 years we start to see problems as wireless service shifts around. We just don't want to leave our citizens stranded. So it's a remote possibility, and I'm just trying to figure out if there's a way to address it.
I would probably say that if you start seeing that happen, I assume all of you will put in legislation to require somebody to do it. And I would think you at that point might reinstate a telecom person at the PUC, et cetera, et cetera. it hasn't been a problem. And competition is alive and well in the telecommunications industry. I mean, people, and as you know, I mean, I'm not going to raise the bad word here but I might, of 5G. I mean, you start seeing all these new technologies and 6G and wireless becoming almost the play for most people. I mean, it's the industry's just moving, and you don't want to stifle it. And I think if you look at my client, just by having to force to be the carrier of last resort is expensive, and so it would be great if they could spend the money building other things. I will say, when I was at Fairpoint, this man called me, and he was from not too far from Keene, and he bought a house down about a 4-mile road, and he was quite cross that we didn't have service, and he wanted us to put it in. Well, of course you'll put it in. He needs to pay for it. And he said, well, it's a spec house, and how dare you? You know, you're going to make me pay for it? I said, well, you know, you're way in the woods. So I said, don't worry about it. We'll work it out. There were other carriers that I then called up and said, you know, can you do a fixed wireless play there? And I'll never forget this one young man who was an entrepreneur and trying to get his business going. He said, you're calling me and asking me? You're going to give him as a customer? I said, yeah. And he did, and it was great. You as a carrier don't want to lose any customers at all. So you're going to fight for those customers. You're to do everything you can to keep your territory and expand it. And even now, the Ma Bells can go within each other's territory. So I think competition is really alive and well here.
Senator Gray?
Yeah, I went into the statute and I expected somewhere in 374:22-G to find something in there that told me what their obligation under the last resort thing is. And it's not mentioned in there. Where do I go find what the obligation for a telephone, because that's what 374 is, what their obligation of provider of last resort is? Where do I look?
I can't tell you off the top of my head, and I don't have my cell phone with me, but I think Sarah...
It was actually, I was hoping you'd have an answer, but I'm going to ask Josh to come back up later.
Okay.
So
or
it's kind of a hint for him.
We're going to have to move the hearings quite along.
Okay.
I still got
And
3 other hearings.
Sarah behind me may have the answer, because she's got her computer, and I'm sitting up here naked.
Yeah, I have 3 more bills to go through,
Okay.
so I got to kind of move along. So, any further questions?
Great.
Seeing none. Sarah?
Thank you so much. I'm leaving it on.
Chair Vard, members of the committee, my name is Sarah Davis, and I'm with Consolidated Communications, and I'm here in support of this bill. I have really beautiful testimony, but I know you have things to get to, so I will keep it really brief and try to address all of the questions you asked. If I forget something, please feel free to ask it again. First, I just want to start with Consolidated is absolutely committed to serving the state of New Hampshire. In 2021, Consolidated built over 1,900 miles of fiber, expanded its fiber to the premise service to over 130,000 locations. In 2022, we intend to expand our fiber to an additional 115,000 locations, and by 2025, we will have expanded our fiber to the premise service to 220,000 locations. That's where the industry is going. Right, wireless, fiber to the premise, new technologies. Consolidated is disadvantaged with respect to its competitors because it has the vestiges of regulation from 125 years ago. Consolidated has to provide service, to your question, Senator Gregg, has to provide service to every current customer until such time as is relieved of that obligation by the FCC under Section 214 of the Telecommunications Act. Consolidated cannot abandon service without a petition to do so. In response to the question that we could just walk away, that is not in fact the case. Consolidated, like any other entity, is fully incented to continue to offer service. What it is not incented to do is to keep a service going that isn't what is demanded today. So in the situation in Manchester, where it's completely overbuilding with fiber, it may not make sense to continue that copper landline service into the future. And there shouldn't be a state unfunded mandate to do so on only one provider in a competitive market. And that's the basis for this. The 95 and 97, while not perfect, aims at really recognizing, and it's a municipality. There was talk of census blocks. It is not a census block. It is a municipality. It has to be 95 and 97. And with respect to the conversation about 477 data that says one location in the census block means it's served, that is not the type of data that the FCC is now using or that it has to produce for its maps for the BEAD funding that's coming after the ARPA funding, the second phase of funding. And those maps are expected to be done this summer. And that is the kind of data that would be used to provide this. And I'm sure that the DOE or PUC would ensure that that was the kind of data being used. It's not perfect. It doesn't get everyone, but it tries to identify an area as well served. It requires a landline and a wireless. Those coverage areas may not be the same, but it's generally to say there's a bunch of options in the market. Every single person in the state has the availability of a satellite phone. They work everywhere. There is nobody who is completely without service. With respect to 911, the vast majority nationwide, 70% of 911 calls come from wireless. The other 30% come from landline, and only a very small portion of that is traditional telecom wireline. There was a question about the service that needs to be provided. Any person that has a broadband connection has the availability of wireless service, a voice over internet protocol service over that broadband connection. There are a number of providers. But we really tried to sew this up. You can never get to 100% because there's always somebody who lives off the grid somewhere. You know, we wouldn't want to set a bar that actually functionally never gave any relief, but is meant to sort of make sure that there is competition so that we're not going to the most rural part of the state where no one is and we're able to relieve ourselves. And in those really rural areas, that's a very small number. So when you're talking, you know, in a town of a couple hundred people, 3% starts looking real small. So it really is, you have to, when you think of Manchester and 3%, that's a big number, but because of that big number, they're well served, right? So it kind of balances those adequately. With respect to, there was one other question that I want to address and I just forgot it. So I'll let you tell me what I've missed.
We appreciate you.
Oh, can I say one thing? Sorry, I'm really sorry. So the question about what happens if they go away. Now functionally that is a concern. You know, once a wireless company permits a cell tower, I don't see why you've spent all the money and investment in infrastructure to permit and build a cell tower and then go away. So I think it's a really remote possibility, but certainly one. Same with a cable company or any other company that builds wireline infrastructure. You're going to spend all the capital to build the infrastructure and then not take the revenue at the end of that. It just doesn't make any sense. But in the event it would, there's not really a way to ensure that the provider come back, because think functionally what you'd be asking us to continue to maintain lines that no one's using for the event that 15 years down the line we may have to turn them back on. That it's just a longer unfunded mandate. I think if God forbid that situation happened, it would have to be how we started this industry, which is universal service support, incenting people to come and provide this. And that's the real problem, is that there used to be support for this. This mandate used to be funded. Now it's an unfunded mandate because universal service support has flipped to broadband support. Sorry.
Well done. Good job.
I went as fast as I could.
You did a great job.
Thank you.
Senator, question? Go ahead.
So safe to say that if one of these providers, if you went bankrupt, there would be no proviso in law that says someone else has to pick that up. Is that correct?
That's
there
right.
There isn't one now, and it's really not possible to make one.
That's right. That's
you.
right. It's too remote.
You did a great job.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
All right, thank you. And anybody else want to speak on this? Representative O's. We're up against the clock, so I just want to...
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. 10 seconds. I just want to correct the record. I said that the petitions would be filed with the PUC. It's actually, if you look at the statute, the Department of Energy that would approve these petitions. Thank you. Just wanted to correct the record.
Yeah, it's all right. You're forgiven. Go ahead, Josh.
I will be brief. To answer Senator Gray's earlier question about if there were existing customers, and the carrier of last resort left, they would lose service. So it's not just prospective customers; it's current customers as well.
Senator Gray.
And the follow-up was, where do I go find the words utility of last resort or whatever it is?
I was feverishly trying to look it up on my phone. I could not find it. Telecom has sort of spread a couple of different statutes. I will, when I get back to the office, I will find that for that definition and send it to the committee.
Senator Gray.
And Roman 2 of the statute that we're modifying still talks about commission. I'd also like somebody to look at that.
Thank you. I know you have another bill. It's a cleanup bill. We can add that in as well if necessary.
Real quick.
Yeah, $100,000, which you don't have for the rules. Would there be ongoing costs as well as petitions come in?
It would depend on the volume of petitions that came in.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. I hate to cut it short, but I have 3 other bills and people have been waiting, so I have to be polite and recognize the person for HB 1459 FN. Now we're overdue on this one.
Yeah.
So I gotta be mindful of that.
There's gonna be a lot of people who want to talk about this.
Yeah. So, yeah, I need these right away. Thank you. Oh, that's it?
Yeah, it's all for this one.
Okay, good. You have the floor, Representative.
Thank you. I'm Representative Fred Plett. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Senators. I just passed out some written testimony on this bill. And it's interested time. I will try not to go verbatim, but speed it up some.
Thank you.
I just say that this bill has established a program for recycling of photovoltaic solar panels. It's modeled after a law adopted in the state of Washington, Chapter 70.355 RCW. California has a rule rather than a law that does the same thing. Several states have looked at end-of-life PV. They passed laws in 2020 looking for studies to come back with regulatory and legislative solutions. Hawaii in May 20 had pending legislation to require a comprehensive study of the recycling. Rhode Island has considered legislation, if enacted, would create a PV module manufactured stewardship and take-back program. U.S. Department of Energy has announced they're studying the issue. In fact, they just got handed the USDOE says the cost to recycle PV modules is significantly higher than the landfill fee. Establishing safe, responsible, and economic end-of-life practice will support greater development of solar energy. And they go on about talking about a sustainable way of doing it. In most states, the responsibility of residential solar panel disposal currently falls on homeowners, adding another financial barrier to solar technology. Depending on the type of solar panel, the waste has the potential to leach hazardous materials such as cadmium, lead, silver, telluride, and selenium into soil and water, which can harm surrounding communities and ecosystems. Close to 100% of the materials in a solar panel are recyclable or reusable, but the heavy metals are a concern. Panels also have adhesives and sealants that make breaking them apart challenging. Solar panels are complicated to recycle. Most solar panel recyclers can mechanically recover the layers of glass, aluminum, copper wiring. However, strategies for improving recovery of the semiconductor layer, especially the market-dominant silicon, are being developed by a limited number of companies in the United States. And I have a quote by one of them saying how difficult it is to demanufacture these things. They have to break it down with acids and stuff. Installer could choose to contract with solar recycling companies to effect the take-back. A quick internet search will identify several companies. Through 2020, 153 megawatts of solar panels have been installed in New Hampshire. By 2025, that's expected to grow to about 389 megawatts. That translates in round terms to 2 million panels, or 400 acres worth. Their installations are rapidly proliferating. So that means a lot of solar panels eventually headed for the scrap pile. Panels may have an economic life of 15 to 30 years, less if there's a defect or the economics dictate early change out, more if you're willing to settle for a lower turnout, a lower production. Some installed early in the period of solar growth may be headed there already. Decommissioned PV panels could total 1 million tons of waste in the United States by 2030, or 1% of the world's e-waste. What's a solar panel's useful life? That depends on economics. Like a lot of solar equipment, solar panels don't perform at 100% for their entire life and then just quit. Most manufacturers will guarantee 90% or better performance for the first 10 years, but then it drops to 80% for the next 10 and for the remaining 15 to 20 years. After the system's useful life, the panels can go on producing electricity, but at a diminished rate, so that economics may eventually dictate replacing with new panels, especially if new solar panels become more efficient and cheaper. It's an incipient problem, and getting ahead of it, as this bill does, saves precious landfill space and major costs to municipal or private waste management entities money by keeping the panels out of the waste stream. The difference between solar panels and other power production is that solar panels are dispersed through a large area, each being of relatively little economic value at end of life. Central station power plants can be and are remanufactured or repurposed, on the other hand, and most larger facilities go through a site evaluation committee process, and that site evaluation committee process will require end-of-life handling, what to do with the site after it's decommissioned. It differs from small electronics and appliances. I got that question too through hearing. A local DPW can handle for typically $25 or under. I just recycled a computer, a laptop, for $5. Cost per solar panel may run $25 to $30 to recycle, as opposed to $1 for landfill. That's from Dr. Google. And there are 20 to 25 panels typically in a house, so the cost per homeowner, as of last year, can run well over $600. And given recent inflation, that could be pushing $1,000. The bill before you passed the STE committee of the House, and then the full House, with minor typographical errors that need fixing, which could be repaired by an amendment from this body or by legislative services on final passage. In many places, the text refers to a installer, when an installer would be better English. And on page 2, lines 22 and 32, there is reference to distributor, installer, or installer, when the second instance of installer should be retailer. So it should read distributor, installer, or retailer. The clerk of the House should have designated this bill as an early bill, but did not. He admits that was an error. As a result, the bill did not go through the House Finance Committee before coming to you. This needs fixing in this body, a financial review, because it does require an extra position at Department of Environmental Services. In conclusion, this bill anticipates the problem will certainly come about without addressing it. Without addressing it, does not kick the can down the road, but addresses it head on. I'm open for questions.
I appreciate you getting right to the point, and I thank you. And Senator Gaida with a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative, I'm looking on page 2, line 25 and 6. It says that the photovoltaic models can be developed to take back locations without cost to the last owner or holder. So who would assume those costs?
The bill is written so that the primary entity working with the Department of Environmental Services, the installer, and that installer would pick up the cost. Of course, it would be passed on to the people installing the solar panels, but not at the end of life. It would be beginning of life. And with the quotes I just gave you, about $600 to $1,000 on an $18,000 installation, and it wouldn't be $600 to $1,000 at the beginning of life, because you got 30 years interest, so it might be a quarter of that. And so it would be on the ratepayer, on the person installing the panels, but with a program administrated by the Department of Environmental Services involving with the installer. And this bill started out with manufacturer, and somebody said, well, what if the manufacturer from China? How are you going to chase them? And then it changed to retailer. It said, well, retailer could be from Mexico. Who's going to chase them? So it wound up installer. And the installer, of course, can work with the manufacturer for feedback, monetary contributions, but a lot of it will be on the installed entities' premises, their costs.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Do you know if is there a market from the manufacturers of these panels for the recycled heavy metals or materials that we're trying to keep from leaching into the ecosystem?
I can't answer precisely whether it's from the manufacturer. I will say that I did a Google search, and there are all sorts of entities popping up to do just this.
Okay, thank you.
Seeing no further questions, thank you very much for your testimony. We appreciate it.
Okay.
And Representative Boyd. Wishing to speak? Okay. Representative, let's see. Representative Alexander?
Mr. Chair, that was for the next bill.
Oh, for the next bill. Why do I have this here? Okay. 1491. Okay. I got a wrong sign-up sheet. This one too. This doesn't belong up here either. Yep. Okay, Mr. Sanborn?
Good morning again. For the record, Mark Sanborn, Assistant Commissioner, New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services. I'm here on behalf of the department to testify. We oppose this bill. I know we're short on time, so I'll be really quick. Two main reasons. Number one, we don't feel we have enough information, and our waste management division doesn't feel they understand the topic of recycling this equipment well enough at this point to effectively implement this. We believe that this should be included in the study bill that's part of HB 1049 that is looking at waste management overall in the state. And we believe this would be a really appropriate topic for there to be reviewed so we could better understand the issue that the topic we'd be asked to implement. And the second reason is there's a fee attached to this. So that's even more concerning to us, that we'd be establishing a fee on a subject that we don't quite feel ready to administer. So we feel it'd be a much better idea, put this in 1049, let's study it, let us get a better understanding. How does it fit into the other waste management, landfill issues we're dealing with in the state, and we can look at it holistically. We think that would be much more effective, and we'd be much more comfortable administering something, being asked to administer this.
Questions from the committee? Thank you very much for your testimony.
Thank you.
Sam Evans. Welcome.
Thank you.
I'm just going to remind everybody, I still got two more bills.
Yeah.
I guess we got a little bit long-winded on the last couple, so.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, the committee. I'm happy to be very brief. Clean Energy New Hampshire, Sam Evans Brown. We also oppose this bill. I could talk for a while about problems I see with the bill and discontinuities between the Washington State program and the program that's suggested here. But I think the easiest point is that by NREL, the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, suggests that by 2030, solar panels could be as much as 1% of the nation's e-waste. E-waste constitutes 2% of our waste stream. So we're coming in with a program that is aimed at a single product that would at the end of the decade constitute 1% of 2% of our waste. And if you look around you in the room today, look at all the laptops, look at all the cell phones in everyone's pockets, there's no stewardship plan for any of those products. And the question is, why are we singling out this one product? And that's my basic point.
Thank you. Thank you for your, well, questions from the committee? Seeing none. Thank you. All right. Moving right along. James Hasselbeck? Welcome.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
Dear Chair Everett and members of the committee, I will be as quick as I can. I have some good sources I'll email to the group afterwards. My name is James Hasselbeck for the record, and I appreciate the opportunity to be testifying here in opposition to HB 1459. I'm a resident of Kingston, husband and father of 3, and have been personally involved in the design, installation, construction, and maintenance of solar panels in the state of New Hampshire since 2008. Believe it or not, that makes me an old timer in this industry, so I've been around here since we've started. My role as Director of Operations at Revision Energy allows me to represent 340 employee owners in our state and Maine and Massachusetts, and we build this stuff. So we are doing this actual work every single day. Since 2018, I've also had the pleasure to serve on the board of directors of the Amicus Operations and Maintenance Cooperative. Operations and maintenance is part of the industry's term that deals directly with end-of-life care in these solar systems. The Amicus Operations and Maintenance Cooperative was a result of a National Department of Energy Sunshot grant, and our mission was directly focused to improve, streamline, and reduce the costs of O&M and end-of-life planning for solar systems. So I can provide both a local, state, and national perspective on what the industry is already doing to solve this problem. I'm testifying in opposition for 4 simple reasons. Reason 1, New Hampshire doesn't currently have a problem related to an overabundance of solar panels. The solar panels most commonly installed in our region are 99% non-hazardous and 95% recyclable with technology readily available today. These percentages will continue to drop while costs continue to drop in the multi-decades between now and the time we need to decommission these systems. 2, renewable energy companies are uniquely focused on environmental impact as a part of our business model. End-of-life considerations for solar systems are real, and as an industry, we are 100% committed to solving them. This work is well underway in New Hampshire and nationally. 3, this bill places an inordinate financial penalty on small businesses operating in an already challenging environment. It will ultimately result in increasing costs to end-user consumers, and worse yet, the potential loss of jobs in nascent clean energy companies in our state. 4th reason, this bill seems uniquely on New Hampshire by imposing a legislatively mandated and administrative and compliance burden to one particular segment of the free economy. The precedent this bill would set for consumer electronics, which has other significantly more dangerous components inside, would be pretty troubling if we think about television, cell phones, computers, and air conditioners. The federal government's working on this. The Department of Energy is working on this. There's a ton of resources out there putting hundreds of millions of dollars into this exact problem because this is not a cost. This is a future revenue stream. There's a big debate called circular manufacturing economy. We're doing this already. There's one particular company that I work with who paid over $2 million. They paid hosts $2 million last year for the privilege to recycle their solar panels. So this is happening already, and I worry that if this bill adds first cost right now today to my industry, we will have just one more challenge to help create jobs. Right now, I have 155 well-paid electricians working for my team. In 2022, I'm gonna hire 90 people. 15 of those jobs are in the state of New Hampshire. The balance are in Maine and Massachusetts. The only difference in our growth trajectories in New Hampshire is policy. It's hard enough here already. Don't make it harder. I'm a job creator. Let me do that.
95% recyclable. Where do they get recycled?
There's a variety of different resources. I have a company in Goffstown that we work with, and there's other national providers too, including Massachusetts.
Super. Questions from the committee? Well done.
Thank you.
Thank you. Rick? Rick Russman, opposed?
Yes, thank you, Senator and members of the committee. 25 years ago, I had the privilege of sitting in that chair as the chair of the Environment Committee, so it's been a long time historically. I'm here to oppose, and I feel your pain, I'm here to oppose 1459. It's anti-consumer because it drives up costs. It's anti-business because it drives up costs. The New Hampshire way is to protect the job maker. That's what we're here to do. We're welcoming of small businesses, and this bill is just not that. The bill expands government, increases regulation. It essentially adds a new tax. The DOE is already working on this federally, which is probably where it should come from.
My guess is that with the way the world is today with Russia and Ukraine and whatnot, we're going to be mining these materials even more so to not have to deal with other countries. I have panels on my office some 11 years ago. My guess is that when they end 20 years from now, if I'm still here, we'll get more efficient panels, and certainly the company will take those other ones away for me, so I'm not concerned about that. I also serve as chair of the Solar Energy Committee in Kingston, where we're going to be putting it on our landfill, and as part of our request for proposals will be end of life taking care of that. I would urge you to find the bill inexpedient to legislate, and appreciate your time. Thank you.
So it should be honorable refreshment.
Well, something like that, right? Thank you much. Appreciate that.
We appreciate your service here.
All right. Thank you.
Well.
Take care.
Questions from the committee?
You haven't aged today.
Okay. Thank you. Take care.
Thank you. I have nobody else here to speak. Does anybody else want to speak briefly? Yes, sir.
Representative Fred Platt again. I just wanted to say the opposition from the Department of Environmental Services catching me by surprise, because I talked with Michael Nork of their staff, and he works for Michael Wimsat and obviously for the head. And they were neutral at the time. They never testified in the House during the Senate Science, Technology, and Energy, so their opposition today is by surprise.
Duly noted, and I thank you for your testimony, sir. So we will now close the hearing on 1459. We're going to hear from the prime sponsor of 1491.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, Senators. For the record, my name is Representative Joe Alexander. I represent Hillsborough District 6, Town of Goffstown. I'm here to introduce 1491 relative to natural gas transmission pipeline safety. So this is basically just advanced notification legislation. It seeks to create pipeline safety dialogue between property developers and owners and natural gas pipeline operators when new land use or property development is planned near a pipeline. Why it's needed. In Tennessee, for instance, developers build homes right up to the right-of-way, which resulted in landowners assuming the right-of-way was their backyard. So it created building structures in an unsafe manner. In Pennsylvania, a developer designed homes close to 16 feet from a pipeline that would not make, and it would not allow them to make any modifications or any modifications to the development. So this bill is good for developers by knowing where the pipeline is and how it's constructed. They'll be able to modify their designs on new development with the location of the pipeline in mind, supported by New Hampshire home builders. So it's basically, the goals is to establish communication between developers and pipeline operators. This bill would only affect one pipeline, and it's 80 miles. It's an intrastate pipeline that goes between Vermont, northern New Hampshire, and Maine. We have a representative from that district here to testify in support of this bill. So it's helping workforce housing development. It helps just preemptively establish a dialogue between a developer and the pipeline operator. So there was an amendment in the House that fixed concerns raised by New Hampshire Municipal Association. So this bill has their support. And then the only other thing is there's a fiscal note on the bill. That fiscal note NHMA will bring up that's being updated. The impact of this bill would be negligible and fiscal impact. So that is all. Happy to take questions.
Thank you for your testimony. Senator Waters with a question.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Representative. So really this is about transparency and making it, because the mapping will be done and the locations will be identified, it doesn't change the existing statute over distances and so on. It just is saying we're going to have the mapping, you're going to know. So if you're a developer, municipality, you can communicate to folks.
Right, and that information, Senators, is public already, like where the mapping data is already public. This just creates a dialogue between the developer and the pipeline operator. So it's kind of a box that you check when you're looking to develop property.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you for your, Senator Gadd.
Couple of questions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Line 16, page 1. You talk about natural gas transmission pipeline as an interstate pipeline. Are there any non-interstate pipelines in New Hampshire? Are there any local ones?
Well, thank you for your question. I'm sure there are. This is the only one that this is affecting is the 80 miles in northern New Hampshire. It's between multiple states.
Second question, if I may. Thank you, Mr. Chair. On page 2, line 10, it says developer has received written consent from the natural gas pipeline operator and has filed this consent with such regional planning commission. Why the regional planning commission?
I believe it was just, I mean, so these are 3 different criterias that one must be met. And it says it may, the House also changed the shall to a may, so it's amended a lot of things, amended it here, but it basically just says one of 3 criteria needs to be met. So it's filed the consent with the Regional Planning Commission. Developer has not received written consent with the natural pipeline operator, but is filed with the local use board. So it could be Regional Planning Commission, local use board.
I would object to Regional Planning Commission.
Okay.
They have no statutory authority, and I would insist that that language be taken out. Put something else in, whether it's the local land use boards or someone that has elected people on it to maintain the interests of the public.
Okay.
Senator Waters for the question?
Yeah, wouldn't it be fair to say that there are municipalities in the North Country who may not have their own planning department, but rely on the Regional Planning Commission to fulfill that function under contract?
Right, and the only, I mean, it's affecting multiple municipalities in northern New Hampshire, that 80 miles, and a lot of those don't have their own land use boards.
And if I may follow up, wouldn't it also be fair to say that the Regional Planning Board works with DOT on transportation corridors, and that this pipeline in particular is contiguous with transportation corridors in various places?
Yeah, that's very fair to say. Thank you, Senator.
Could be filed with DOT through the chair, Senator Waters, as well. I'm not aware of any communities that don't have a planning board. None that I'm aware of, and I'd be happy to take a list of those if you can provide it.
I'm going to defer to the representative from the North Country that's here to testify on that, if that's okay.
Oh, that's fine.
Yeah. Representative Alexander? Oh, thank you for your testimony.
You're welcome.
Wishing to testify? Representative Alexander? Wishing to speak? Oh, duh. I'm sorry. Myrna. I'm looking at you and I'm thinking Alexander. Why aren't you standing up?
I didn't know who else you had on your list.
My fault. My fault.
Thank you. For the record, I'm Troy Myrna from Lancaster, Co-op 7, and I represent Lancaster, Dalton, Carroll, Jefferson, Randolph, Northumberland, Dummerstark, and Milan.
Almost like a senator.
I got as big as a Senate district. I'm a flotarial up there. So this 80-mile thing goes right through my district, the northern tier district of my district. And also I'm on the county planning board. I'm the one representative because we have 23 unincorporated towns mixed in up there. So, and I can tell you there's planning boards in every single thing that to Senator Guida's point.
Thank you.
So as TC Energy has come, they've been a very good partner with the community up there. Their staff, their first responders, they get involved in the process, and are very easy to contact TC. They're a good partner. They pay nearly $5 million a year in property tax. They work with local fire departments, environmental groups, trail programs. They donate to certain projects in the North Country, and training and support. The bill doesn't prohibit local authorities from doing their job. It only helps strengthen the communication with the developers of the projects in the pipeline company. We worked on the bill in the House, which I'm a member of Science, Energy, and Technology, and ensured that no fiscal impacts of the community, and the pipeline works on supplying files, marking lines, and we get a better getting the mapping stuff from them. We do the same with the developers. It's a good bill, and that's all. If you guys have any questions on the North Country.
Do you have any issues with changing the language for the planning commission? Or
no, I don't have any. Yeah, that's.
Oh, yeah, Senator Guida.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Now, my suggestion would be that they advise the DOT, the DOE, and the county planning board. Since
Okay.
it's,
Yep. And I am the representative for the county planning board, so I have 5 jobs up there, so.
Same pay, right?
I get paid well for all of them.
He's only 29 years old.
Yeah. Well, you look good. Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
I'm going to ask Josh, do you have any comments from Department of Energy? Do you have anything that you would add or any concerns today?
I will be brief. Josh Elliott for the Department of Energy. Just here to answer questions. We have no concerns. Obviously, there's a nexus with our Dig Safe program. But yeah, no, we have no objections, no concerns with the language.
With suggestions from Senator Gaida on changing some of the language?
You could include the Department of Energy if you wished. However, we already have that nexus working with the pipeline operators through the Dig Safe program, as well as the developers again through our Dig Safe program.
So that would be redundant, if I may?
It would be belt and suspenders approach, but if you wanted to include it, it wouldn't do any damage, but I don't think it would change much.
So is belt and suspenders the new nomenclature for redundant?
I guess. I mean, I've heard it used a lot. It's that's a very common legislative term of art.
He says it all the time. I was just curious.
It's just
in the interest of gender neutrality, we could also add garters and girdles.
Garters and girdles. Oh no, we are not going there. We're moving right along. Thank you very much, Josh.
You're welcome. I'm not going to opine on that.
All right. Okay. Notch. Is it notch or natch?
It's like nature.
Of course it is.
So appropriate that I appear on these nature-related bills.
And you're in support?
We are in support. I represent the New Hampshire Municipal Association. We view this simply as a safety issue. The amendment that we had offered in the House that was adopted simply adjusts some of the language to mirror existing language about abutters, and so realistically it just makes the interstate pipeline an abutter like any other, except there's 1,000 foot from the center of the pipeline. We did do a fiscal note on this bill, as Representative Alexander noted. It's really a minimal cost here. As Representative Murner noted, the pipeline operator is already working with the affected municipalities, so we don't really anticipate any significant costs whatsoever. And we have no objection to adjusting the notification to make sure that it's the appropriate state and local entities.
Duly noted.
Thank you.
Daley, you got that, right? Okay. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none? Thank you. And our final speaker is B.J. Perry. Welcome.
Hello. I'm BJ Perry of TC Energy. I live in Bedford, and thanks for taking the time to hear this bill and here in support of 1491, the Pipeline Safety Bill. As I told you, Senator Avard, I've never testified before this committee, so be gentle. Thank you. For over 70 years, TC Energy has been providing energy, including natural gas, hydro, and renewables to consumers across the continent in 40 states. As mentioned earlier, our interstate transmission pipeline spans 80 miles across Coos County, connecting Vermont and Maine, known as PNGTS. The line transports nearly 400,000 decatherms a day and has helped provide new opportunities, providing energy and economic development. And just in case Senator Waters or Avard wants to quiz me, I reached out to my engineer at TC, and I have in your packets the definition of a decatherm. So there you go. And because of the concept of time, I'll get right to it. Third-party damage generally caused during construction and excavation activities and remain a leading cause of pipeline incidents. The communication framework here in 1491 greatly reduces the risk of third-party damages to pipeline infrastructure by requiring the affected stakeholders, me and the developers, to collaborate and exchange information at the earliest possibility. 1491's goals is to strengthen the dialogue between interstate transmission pipelines and developers. That's our goal, that's our purpose, that's why we're here today. We appreciate the bipartisan support we had in the House. We appreciate what you guys are doing. And I've included a packet that I gave to Daley that you guys have on who we are and some of our other renewable projects that we're pushing. So in the time, that's it.
Well done. Senator Gatter with a question? Do you have any issues with us changing that language?
It's your bill, so you guys got to do what you got to do.
Representative Alexander, you're okay with that too, right? Okay, so you'll usher Representative Bose? Okay, good. All right, so we'll make those changes when we're going to executive. Seeing I have no further questions, we're going to close the hearing on 1491. Thank you very much. Beautiful. Moving right along. This is our last bill, correct? All right. And we'll hear from the prime sponsor of HB 1546FN. Representative Boyd, smiling. Wonderful. How are you today?
Senator Avard, I'm doing good. Thank you very much. And Mr. Chair, through you to Senator Guider, Senator Waters, and Senator Perkins Squawka. My name is Bill Boyd. I am a state representative from Hillsborough, District 21, representing the town of Merrimack. And I present to you and ask for your support of House Bill 1546, which the original analysis was to limit the emissions of chlorofluorochemicals and further define chlorofluorochemicals as they were being emitted into the air. When I first created the bill, I had targeted specifically going after X number of pounds, specifically 45 pounds of what could be emitted annually by a specific company. I'm very grateful that some folks at Department of Environmental Services reached out to me and they said, we understand what you're trying to do, but there's a better way to go about this, to maybe begin to have that kind of conversation where we can begin to, you know, take a skeleton and begin to put the flesh and the meat on the skeleton. So after talking with DES was kind enough to put together some sample language, and the bill, which came out of Science and Technology, I actually walked into that committee hearing with the amendment in hand. So now what we've done is we've changed the analysis to define PFAS and to actually give the Commissioner of DES to be able to adopt a rule about airborne PFAS in certain substances. So the new law as presented, beginning on January 1st of 2023, if there is a study that is scientifically proven that relates to PFAS that is having an environmental or public health impact on the atmosphere, that they would look at studying it and potentially adding that particular PFAS analyte to their list of toxic substances and including it as a part of their air toxic contaminant program. So that is the gist of the bill in a nutshell. For me, it's pretty straightforward, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for your testimony, Senator Guider.
Just to be clear, what you're supporting and presenting is 1546 as amended by the House with 899H.
That's exactly correct. Thank you for the clarification.
Okay. Further questions from the committee? Well done. Seeing none.
I'm disappointed.
No, you did good. That means you just wowed us.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
I appreciate it.
I only have one speaker left, and welcome, Kristen. All right. And from the BIA. Now, this is on the new proposed language? Or what?
I'll be testifying on the bill as amended by the House.
Okay.
Okay. So, good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Kirsten Koch, and I represent the BIA. I'm testifying today to express the BIA's concerns on this bill as amended by the House. We do believe that the House amendment was a modest improvement, but we still believe that the bill could be further strengthened and improved to encourage best practices. And our concern is that this bill as amended by the House instructs the Commissioner of DES to find any single study, which could include questionable research or predetermined results, to prove, what the bill asks it to demonstrate. And so we believe that DES, as the experts in this area, should have the latitude to objectively consider multiple studies that provide accurate, recent, and thoroughly proven information. So BIA suggests a quick amendment here, and it's included in my written testimony here in the italics for your convenience. And we would suggest striking lines 6 through 13 and replacing it with the language of, by January 1st, 2023 and annually thereafter, the Commissioner shall consider peer-reviewed studies of health effects of individual PFAS chemical in humans and will consider whether to establish or modify classification of ambient air limit for such individual PFAS chemical by adopting rules in accordance with provisions of RSA 551A. So this allows DES the latitude to review their studies and make an informed decision of whether they need to establish or modify limits. So in conclusion, we would just urge the committee to amend the bill with this language to ensure that science-based policy is guiding the state of New Hampshire. Thank you for your consideration. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Senator Gaida.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Would you object to including the language on lines 9 and 10 that cites specific conditions?
Absolutely
amendment?
not. We would support that change.
We lose Representative Boyd? Okay. All right. Any further questions from the committee?
So if I may,
Senator Waters.
I mean, it's not exact, but what I guess the good selection from our colleague Senator Gaida, do I understand it? Then what you're asking is that where the proposed language from BIA has individual PFAS chemicals on human, and then maybe we'd have a such as to include what's listed in 9 and 10.
Yeah, we can language to that effect.
Yeah,
We'll work out
and
the
we'd have a
exact
such as, and we'll consider whether to establish, so just, I think that makes a lot of sense if that's what you're proposing, yeah.
I don't even need the such as. I think if this says acute, chronic, mutagenic, reproductive, or developmental health effects, that's pretty broad. All right, so such as, I know that's probably extraneous language.
No, it just means
Belt
that
and
it might be
suspenders.
something larger, there might be other ones that come up, there might be other ones as well, that's all, but either way.
All right.
Fine, we'll
I
work
wanna
it out,
get-
work it out. Yeah. good
Any
suggestion.
questions from our testifier? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Representative Boyd, you okay with that?
Yes.
Good.
Okay.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you.
The friendly amendment.
Friendly amendment. I like that.
I want to hear from the DES.
I think he left.
We're
okay.
fine with the change.
If you'd take a seat, I'd appreciate it.
Welcome.
Kathy Bean.
Am I correct that the way this bill is modified, it would give your department the ability to set the limits independent of the legislature?
So this is an attachment or an addition to the already existing air toxics rule that already allows for that rulemaking to go on for other compounds. This just adds PFAS as a listed compound to do analysis or evaluate the studies.
All right, let's try that again. Does this allow, existing law and this, the final version is this law impacting it, does it allow DES to set the limits for air?
Yes.
Thank you. I think by my tone, you can tell that I'm not really happy with that.
I can tell by your
Mr. Chair.
tone. Further comments?
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
So, just to clarify, the question here from Senator Gray, it has been the capacity of DES to set these limits for a long time now, under the Clean Air Act and other.
Under this particular statute.
Yeah.
So
And
nothing's changing?
Nothing is changing other than adding PFAS as a specific compound to look for studies.
thank you.
No. Senator Gray?
I got the answer to my question, and I think the rest of the committee knows what my objection is, and that we'll discuss that more, I'm sure, when we get into executive session.
So for my edification, you already have this ability, we're just adding an extra section.
Yes,
All right, we're not doing anything other than that.
that's correct.
Any further questions? Wow, we did it. Thank you very much. Anybody else want to talk? I have a minute. We did it. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to close the hearing. And we are done.